Greetings and welcome to another great episode. I am your host, Eric. For this conversation, I am joined by Alle Eriksson, Swedish publisher at Nypon Publishing House, a publisher of books for children and adults. Some of Alle's credentials include once owning a bookstore and publishing company and being a librarian for the city of Stockholm. They were also part of starting an LGBTQ plus youth space in Stockholm. Earlier this year, in 2024, Alle was on the committee for the Nordic Council's Youth Literature Prize. Around since 1962, it's an award given to works of fiction written in one of the Nordic languages, which includes Swedish, Danish, Norwegian, Icelandic, and Faroese. I suppose I'm saying that correctly. With justice and inclusion leading the way, intersectionality has been an important component throughout Alle's professional career, making communities safer for those outside the margins of mainstream society. I look forward to learning more about who they are and how they use all the colors of their professional and personal rainbow to educate, enlighten, and celebrate those around them.
Thank you so much. It was a beautiful introduction, and it's really exciting to hear it read back like that. It's like, oh man, I did all those things. That's true.
I've heard that from a lot of people, that thing of like, you don't know how much you've accomplished until you hear it coming from someone else.
Because when you're in the middle of it, you just do what needs to be done.
I can tell by what's behind you, your love of books. I love books too. So seeing your bookshelf and all those books there just kind of makes my heart sing.
Mine too.
So we are recording on a Tuesday. Just to get us maybe settled into things, how has the start of your week so far?
I'm living on this quite remote island, which is called Öland, which is on the east side of the Swedish coast. But I work in Lund, which is on the mainland, like 3.5 hours drive away from the island. So I've been to Lund and now I'm back home. So yeah, it's been intense.
So do you do a drive like that every day, or do you take transportation?
I usually stay maybe 1 or 2 nights in Lund, and then I work the rest from home.
I'm super excited to have this conversation. One of the highlights of speaking with individuals like you is like when I do the research and I find out all these amazing things. So I very much look forward to who you are professionally and what your journey has been like as far as being a Swedish professional. You are a publisher for Nypon Publishing House. Can you explain what your role is there?
I get to do the fun stuff, which is telling people, hey, I like your manuscript. We want to go ahead and work with you and work with manuscript, and we want to make a book out of it. We want to publish it. So that's really fun. But otherwise, I'm like a project manager for the whole book from start to finish. I work with a great group of people who edits and does all the stuff that makes a book happen. And the Nypon is a special publishing house, so we're doing books for people that are in some way struggling with reading, with literacy. So that's our main focus, to get people to read. I've done a lot of things within the book industry, but I usually say like this might be both the hardest thing. We're doing books for people who, for one or the other reason, can't or don't want to read. We want to get them reading. But it's also like the most rewarding, because when a person who might not have read a book ever, when they find one of our books and read through the whole book and says, this was an amazing experience, then it's like, wow, there's nothing more rewarding than that.
So with some of people that may be needing guidance, does that include people that are learning Swedish as a second language?
Yes, it is.
Is there a particular age range that you focus on when you're having people pitch ideas?
We want to reach like everyone. So we have books for children. We usually start like for children at the age of 5, maybe. And then we have books throughout for adults as well. There are a lot of reasons for why a person might not be able to read. It can either be like dyslexia, or it can be having a hard time focusing for a longer period of time, dementia, things like that. So it can be like totally different reasons, or maybe you're new to the Swedish language and you need like to start with something a little easier.
And how long have you been in this position?
So I've worked with Nypon for 3 years now, 3.5 years.
And I mentioned in the intro that you either have or you had your own publishing company. What was the name of it?
It was called Wombat, and it's still around, which is really exciting. I do not do any work for that publishing house anymore, but I'm so excited to see that it still produces books and still find readers, and I'm really happy about it.
It's interesting hearing your side of how things work within the publishing industry. Just briefly, I'm ghostwriting a book for the first time. I'm in the midst of that right now. And so hearing your role sounds like with the editor that I'm currently working with. So in some ways eases my own fears because, like I said, this is my first time doing this.
It's really exciting with the ghostwriting. I mean, I would want to question you about it, how you came to do it and you ended up doing that. But,
it's definitely been an opportunity and connected to a dream that I've always had as far as, writing and being a lover of books since probably around the time that I could speak as far as what my mother told me. But yeah, just hearing your side of it is just, I guess it humanizes it. And these are positions that I do hold in high regard, that there are people behind those titles. Yeah.
We're definitely basically just humans doing our best.
Just my perception with generations today, young generations today, it's really great to know that there's still a desire and a need to want to read, fall into the world of literature.
In Sweden, like the publishing towards teenagers is really halting. Like all the publishing houses are like, they're doing fewer and fewer books for that target group. And I get really scared when I see that development because I'm like, we can't have a generation that doesn't know what it feels like to be like totally engrossed in a story. I think that's a really scary perspective to have like a generation that doesn't know what that type of fantasy is when you just disappear into a story.
Yeah, very much so. I always say if I have the choice between a really good movie and a really good book, I'm going to choose a book because of, like you said, it's that world. It's not fantasy. The art of a good writer, I guess, is when I've read a really good book, especially fiction, I'm right there. And it's an amazing place to be in.
And I think especially for like young queer people, I think about this a lot because I think like books for young queer people where they can meet a queer life and a queer story and just to be able to be in that space, like to have a safe space for your mind and for your development and learn stuff that maybe you can't talk to anyone else about it, but in that specific book you can like learn, or you can just feel safe, or you can just find a world that suits you. I think that is really, really important.
Do you publish books for that particular demographic?
Maybe not as much as I would want to, but I'm always on the hunt for that type of manuscript. We usually say that we target like maybe 25% of the Swedish populations have some sort of problem with reading. All the things that the main publishers, all the stuff that they do, we do for our 25%. Of course, we need to have books for that target group.
Now, how long have you been in the publishing industry?
Too long to tell you, because then I would have to tell you my age.
Well,
no, but I think I've been in the business for like close to 20 years now.
When did you first realize or discover your love of books or of literature?
You mentioned earlier that your mom said that you've always loved books. And my mom, she used to say that one day when I was like 3, I just started reading. And I don't know if that's true or if that's like her imagination or her memories. I don't know. But I've always read. My relatives are always saying that. They're like, yeah, it's no wonder you work with books. You always had your nose in a book. I would say forever, but I realized I wanted to work with books when I was like maybe 17 or something. I started to realized that it could be something that one could actually do for a living. Then I started to pursue that dream.
Now, did that include going to school with a particular focus as far as your education?
Yeah, it did. I knew that I wanted to work with children's culture, and I thought I wanted to work with TV. So I started out studying TV journalism or stuff like that. And then I realized while I was doing that, while I was studying that, I was like, no, this is not what I want to do. I want to work with books. So then I changed path and started the university in Lund with that focus. And then also Stockholm University, working with children's culture specifically.
Now, did you transition from university to becoming a librarian?
I actually went from university to starting my own publishing house.
Right out the gate.
Yeah, so maybe we were a bit cocky in that regard. We were like, yeah, I can do this. Because it was me and my partner at that time. We started it together. We just saw this space to fill within the industry, because at that time in Sweden, we started it maybe 2006, and our first book was published 2007, I think. At that time in Sweden, there was no publishing houses that catered especially towards intersectionality, because we saw that there are children who doesn't ever see themselves within the literature in Sweden. So we started with that.
Now, when you say intersectionality, you mean ethnic background, culture?
Gay, class, different backgrounds. All books for children were about people living in houses in small towns, and they had a mom, they had a dad, and they were riding bikes. And when I say this, of course, I'm generalizing. Of course, there were a few other books, but as a whole.
What is that saying? If you don't see it, make it happen.
Exactly. Yeah. Something like that. Yeah. We were young and we had ambition and we had a goal. So we could we did it. I mean, now I would probably not have done it in the same way, but it was a good way at the time and for us to do it the way we did it then.
I wanted to, because I don't want to forget it, I got to watch the IKEA interview that you did with your family. For me, it was just very, very touching. It was such a beautiful representation of a queer family. I'll be honest, I got misty-eyed. And maybe because we don't still see that today enough families, like you said, different types of families that are represented in media. How was it sharing your story on such a platform like that?
That's a really interesting question, because it's I just felt like it was important and that we were given a chance, because it's IKEA. It's this huge company that might reach a lot of people. I think people need to see these stories. I really do. I think that's one of my main drives, is that, of course, we met with the production team and spoke to them and what is your intention with this? And it felt right. It was really, really great people to work with, and they made us feel so at ease. It just felt important to share our story.
Beautiful representation. And for this platform, speaking with individuals like you, just a reminder, more and more.
Yeah. It's also super weird to see yourself with the IKEA logo stamped on your head. Of course it's weird, but it's of course there are other families like ours, but now we were given this chance, and I wanted to take it to be able to show the world that we exist.
In the interview or in the video, you talked about you moving from Stockholm to the countryside, where you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation. How has it been since you left Stockholm? It's
been mostly really great, I think. Our closest neighbors, we knew them when we moved to the island, but they are a lesbian couple with children, and that's really comforting and really nice. And we live in this great village with great people. But like one of the things that I think have been the hardest thing is when my son, when he went to like preschool, he was like the only child who had a parent with a different skin tone other than white. Of course, he noticed that, and other children made him notice that. And that was really hard to have those conversations with him when he came home and was like, I'm the only brown kid at school. I feel lonely. And that was one of the things that I was like scared of when we moved, that he would only have me to relate to. But now he started school and it's totally different. There's a lot of kids with different backgrounds and different skin tones. That school is within our village, so that's really great for him to be in that kind of space now.
Thank you for sharing that. That was something, too, that you were candid about in that conversation. You grew up in a similar situation. How were you able to share your experience with him?
Basically, I just told him, like, I know exactly what you're feeling because I've been through the exact same thing. We spoke about like having friends, making friends, and like what matters and what's important and how he can handle himself if someone says anything about like his skin color or that he has two moms or like, so we have to have those conversations. Like you have to be like really conscious of like, it's not coming from a bad place. Usually it comes from like lack of experience, lack of knowledge, and just pure curiosity. And if you can respond to them in that way, maybe you can like just teach them something and they will know this the next time they meet a Black person.
I love how we are more open about the importance of being honest, but making sure that as much as possible, there's not the negativity around it. You know, first of all, for your own family, but maybe even for those that, like you said, that it's just not coming from a place of full knowledge. In the interview, too, your background coming to Sweden from Colombia, the African diaspora is global and it is in South America. That was, to me, another intriguing part of your story. How did you get to Sweden and how did you connect with your family in Sweden?
I was adopted to Sweden by my white parents. I basically know very little about like my biological people.
My apologies if I didn't come at that in a better way. It is genuine curiosity and in some ways personal. I found out when I was around 11, my mother and my aunt were adopted. And then my own story I didn't find my birth father until after my mother died, and there was a whole mystery around that too. These types of stories intrigue me also from a personal vantage point. Yeah.
They are intriguing because like it's a part of you that's, I've always known that I was adopted because I came to Sweden when I was 2. I have 2 white parents and we've talked a lot about it and they've tried to like keep some of the Colombian culture and they've always been like supportive, or what do you want to call it, like when it comes to my Blackness.
Yeah, thank you for that. In that particular piece, just the last thing I'll ask about that is, I haven't seen the film. I could see the box in my hand when you brought it up, the film, the Swedish film, Show Me Love, and how that was connected to your acceptance as a queer person. When did you become aware of that part of yourself?
Oh, I think I was quite young. I was a real tomboy when I was little, when I was growing up. People would always mistake me for being a boy. I never minded. My mom was like, but she's a girl. And I didn't really care because I don't think I ever saw myself as anything other than me, but I was absolutely boyish. So, I mean, I came out when I was 14. I knew for a couple of years.
I like the way you describe it, those internal dialogues I know that I remember having. And well, what if it's this? And well, no, it's not that, but it's definitely this. It's kind of like understanding the ingredients that makes up who you are.
I don't know how old you were when you started to realize this about yourself.
I mean, I came out a lot later, But when I look back, all the clues were there. And definitely when I did start to come out to people in my inner circle, as I still joke today, I've yet to have anyone fall off their chair. So.
Yeah.
My aunt, my mom's sister, is a retired librarian, and she was the last person I came out to as far as people that it was really important for me to be honest about that part of myself. And I was so afraid, and I took her out to a nice lunch, and she knew all along what it was. But when we had the conversation, she said, I knew when you were 4. And I asked her, well, how can you know that? And she said, that's when people around started to talk to me, not to your mother, but they would talk to me and say, he's different. So, yeah.
I'm sorry, but I'm just so curious. Like, how was that for you hearing that when she told you, like, years later?
Oh, that's a good question. Upset at first, because I know my own particular journey, it was the struggle, will I be ostracized? Will I be, these people that I love, will they no longer love me? And then to hear that initially, I was very upset. I didn't say it to her. And maybe it was underneath the upset was the hurt, because it's like, so that just proves that I didn't choose this.
Yeah. I think that response is so interesting, because it can be like both a relief, but also like, why have I been agonizing for years, for some time?
Yeah.
You could have created a safe space for me to say this, to tell you. If you didn't have a problem with it, you could have created that safe space. And maybe they tried. I don't know.
No, all of that, what you just said, is exactly all that was bubbling up inside. So I definitely relate to, how you described it, some of the things, the thought processes of the awarenesses that we have. It's such a gift today that we can talk about it. I was reminded recently, somebody that I interviewed from Uganda, and how I have to remember that this is a gift that you and I can have this conversation and not be in literal fear of our lives. So, yeah.
Absolutely. That's Kevin from episode 90, right?
Stephen, yeah.
Yeah, no, but Stephen, sorry, Stephen. Yeah, no, but it was like, to listen to his story is like, I just also got this reminder that I'm incredibly lucky, but also like super privileged to be able to sit here with you, to talk about this, to do an IKEA commercial, all those things, and just to be open within my work life. I've never not told anyone that. To hear those stories, it's like, it's just a reminder that in some ways we are really moving forward, and we are really like lucky. In some other parts, it's just like, I would encourage everyone to listen to that episode and to like realize how the situation is for some of our queer siblings. I mean, you're doing a great job with this podcast, and like, to shine a light on those things, and we all need to be like allies. I mean, we look for allies amongst white people and straight people and things like that, but we also have to remind ourselves that some of us are in positions to also be allies to our queer siblings who are really struggling.
Very much so. And you're a part of that too. The fact that someone will be able to watch this or listen to it, and even what you're doing as a publisher, I think is super important. It's definitely needed wherever we are in the world. So very much appreciated in that. So give that back to you also.
Thank you. You're so.
Also got to watch your September 2021. My apologies for my pronunciation with Swedish, but was it Trick Conversation with Emily Juth and the actor Alexander Karim. Can you share about that organization?
So Tryck, or Push, is an organization created for cultural workers in Sweden from the Black diaspora. It started in 2010, I think. It was like mostly actors at that time, Swedish Black actors, who felt like they were either typecast to portray criminals or they couldn't get a part. So they wanted to create the conversation, and they want to create a space for themselves to share. But then it grew a little wider, so it was like for all cultural workers. And it has been a really important organization, I think, for people within the cultural industry in Sweden. Things that have happened, like people working within the industry who's been treating them really weirdly and badly in all kinds of different kinds of ways. And to just find also, again, a safe space.
Okay. And now is the organization still in existence?
Yes, it is. It is. We've created like some big music festivals and other cultural festivals. And one of the things that I loved most about this organization was the times in the beginning when we just sat in my bookstore at the time, actually, and we sat around like with these small folding chairs and just talked and shared stories and experiences. And I feel like it was an amazing gift. And I was just so happy I got to be a part of that and to be invited into that space. So yeah, I'm really thankful for that.
Yeah, I really got a lot out of the interview. And one of the key points that I hadn't thought about, I mean, I think about it, but not in the way that the three of you talked about it, with you being a publisher and with Emily being a writer, was it's more than just seeing a person that may look similar to me. It's also highlighting parts of a culture, and including myself as an American, not in Sweden, but in my home countries, there's still that struggle of people still don't know who I am or don't know my background. So I thought that was a really great thing that you guys brought up and highlighted and talked about.
I bet you remember more from that conversation than what I do, since you watched it recently, and for me it was 3 years ago. But you know, it's just really nice to have that space and to be able to talk to those people, and yeah, we just get to share things. It's really nice and important.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, that thing of, I know me, whatever part of myself that I need to accept or flesh out, it's like it's such a gift when, like you said, you can have a conversation with someone, or me say, okay, so it's not just me. Exactly. That is one of the biggest gifts with these kinds of conversations, the one we had in Tryck, or the ones you and I are having today, and the ones I'm trying to like create with books. Like, it's just, you are not alone. It's not just you. I promise you, what you're feeling is somewhat universal. Someone else have felt this. And when you realize that there are other people just like you, or someone who has felt that, and you just can connect with that, it's just like, it makes you feel there's another piece of me. There's another piece that I can be, because I think that is really important, just to help people to be able to be fully themselves. For you, as in your professional life, how much are you aware that is informing how you can influence and positively enlighten others as far as being a Black person in Sweden, or being a queer person? How much of who you are you aware positively impacts what you do?
In some ways, I'm like really aware of that, because we are so few people with a non-Nordic background within the publishing industry in Sweden. If you take all the people that have a background from outside of the Nordic countries, yeah, then you have that little group. But then you have to look at, okay, so how many of them are Black? And then we're like 3 people. The publishing industry in Sweden is quite large, even though it's a small country with a small language. I will stay within this industry, and I will try to change it from within. I will try to meet as many people, like teachers, librarians, readers, to let them know, like, one, you can have this as your work one day. You can work with books. If you're young and you love books, you can do this. If you look like me, you can do this. If you're Black, if you're queer, yeah, you can do this. So I try to like find books and stories that appeal to a wider range of people, because I think that is also like why I want to do what I do, is I want to tell stories of all people, not just the ones with all the privileges. As you can see, I get really passionate about this.
No, I love it. And to me, it's the reminder for myself. I think of activism. You think of somebody out marching in the streets with the signs, but the ways that I myself, say in my own personal journey, that I've become an unintentional activist and said, oh, yeah, I guess I am in this industry or in this particular way. This is the way that I can, to the best of my ability, affect positive change, and exactly what you're doing.
I think that was really well put, like just being an unintentional activist. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've marched in the streets as well, but like just being Black and being queer makes you an activist in some ways. The society is still not fully on our side. Like we still need to go through hard, when you're in your profession, like up on stage, like hosting a conversation with an author and someone just like wants to take you down a notch. We always have to be like prepared for those kinds of things. And so you have to be like an activist because we do have to inform people, and we do have to, when I say inform, it's not my job to inform people, but I still want to inform them to make the change happen.
One of the gifts I'm learning from people younger than me, especially in the last 4 years, is around discriminations, around racism, all that stuff, homophobia, is talking about the emotion behind it. Because when we had this most recent explosion 4 years ago, and I had somebody close to me say, oh, you must be so angry. But it was hearing a younger person say, underneath that is just hurt. Like just hearing what you just shared, it's like, I'm a professional doing my job like you are. And now you do that. Underneath this veneer that I'll say me, that I have to put on sometimes to not break under the pressure, is all these emotions. And one of them is me having to say, that just really hurt my feelings. And that's it.
That's really true. You have to be so angry. No, I'm hurting. I can be furious of how things are, like the state of things, that we haven't come further. Like me and my family, we were just changing trains in Stockholm, and some old man just start yelling profanities at us, and I'm like, shut up. That's my go-to response. I don't have to be like eloquent. I don't have to come up with like, a sassy response to that. No, I just need to tell him to shut up, because I'm not interested in listening to that. I'm not interested in engaging in a conversation with him, because that is a totally different situation from the one we were talking about earlier, like when kids tell you stuff or they ask stuff. Like, no, this man definitely had malicious intent. He was not coming from a place of curiosity. He was hostile. I also need to show my son that it's not okay to talk to us in that way. We have to stand up for ourselves and say, no, this is where I draw the line, and I do not have to respond nicely to you. I don't have to cater to any of your needs. After all that anger, the hurt is, of course, there, because it's hurtful just because I'm this person. I have to be met with that kind of hostility. Of course it hurts. And like, I remember saying to my wife when we first started dating, we were just talking about like, are we this item? Are we this thing now? And I remember saying like, yes, but you need to know that I'm Black. And she looked at me and she was like, yes. And I was like, yeah, but you need to know what that means for us moving forward, because we're going to be an interracial lesbian couple. You're going to see some things that you haven't seen before, maybe, when we're together, when we show our love in public, or like, you prepare yourself, you prepare your loved ones. That's infuriating. That one still needs to do that. And I guess that's also like coming back to, that's why we also have to be these activists in some ways.
I love that you said eloquent. Yeah, I don't always have to be eloquent. I'm assuming that they think I'm the representation of an entire planet of people that I will never meet. I want to be eloquent. It's like, no, I don't want to be eloquent. the importance of saying, there is this great love here that we share, but we still have to have these types of conversations. Yeah. Thank you so much. I do have one question before I ask the last question, and this is just specifically about Sweden. As you know, I've been back and forth there for a while. Definitely have a great network there that it's been fortunate to build. But what are some highlights that you could say about Sweden or Stockholm, or for anybody that wants to visit?
I really love Stockholm, but like every time I come to Stockholm, I'm like, oh my God, I love this place. It's so beautiful. Stockholm in the summer, I think, is the best. Everyone living in Stockholm, they leave Stockholm in the summer, and that's what makes it great. Because then you have like the whole city to yourself. It's warm and it's beautiful and all these things are open and people are friendly and they are happy because the sun's out and the weather's nice. But of course, like you also have to visit like the coasts of Sweden. I also really think people should visit the north, even if it's cold. And in the winter, it's really dark. And in the summer, it's really, really bright because the sun never sets in the north of Sweden. But I think it's also so, so beautiful. Like the nature is amazing. If people get the chance to come to Sweden, they should really visit the north. But also the islands, of course.
Thank you for that. And I always end with asking if you have any final thoughts or insights.
I'm just really happy that we had a chance to have this conversation. And I just want to know so much more about you. So don't be scared if I keep talking to you, if I keep asking you stuff.
No,
after
not at
this
all.
Conversation, because I think a podcast like this is really important because you share such a variety of people. You speak to so many different people with different backgrounds who does different things and who are like coming into this world with different perspectives. And I really want to tell people just to listen to this podcast because it's really, really interesting. You get to meet a lot of interesting people. So I want to thank you for that, for starting this and doing this.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you too. What I like about this conversation is I always have my outline and I have my questions, and I always say that it is a conversation. But one of the highlights for me is that you did ask me questions, and it reminds me that it is easier to ask the questions than to answer them in some ways. And also that just in how you were being who you are and being candid and sharing about, different aspects of your life, it encouraged me to go beneath the surface and be more in the moment. So I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So do you have a social media presence? If so, where can we engage with you online?
I'm on Instagram, Threads, Facebook, and you can find me there. My handle for Instagram is still just a cliche. And I stole that from Skunk Anansis. I was younger then, but I still love that handle. I still love that song, and I still love that line.